Good morning.
Morning.
And welcome our guests to the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Forum. For you guys, because all of these are on people. I'm Laura McClady, one of the facilitators of the Tuesday Forum, as well as Winston Robinson and Jackie Walton, Jackie Evelyn Walton, Sarita Sherrill, Natalie McElroy, Steve Johnson, and Mary Johnson, and Carlenia Ivory. We're facilitators for the Tuesday Forum. And we'd like to welcome you, and we appreciate you coming. And we'd like to get started with a word of prayer. So Sarita will lead us with a word of prayer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's bow our heads and pray, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for today. We're thankful for each other. We're thankful for this forum. And we're sure Accellacare is going to give us information that will be fruitful for our lives and our neighborhood and our city. Lord, bless our children everywhere, all the time. They need prayer. Bless us as we continue as a group. We love each other. We love doing this. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Let us say together.
Amen. Amen. You can have a seat. Before we get started, just to share with you, from and your staff, we have people that will be coming in. Y'all feel free to sit. We have people that come in and out respectfully. We ask everybody to silence their phone, but we have you to do your presentation. Once you do your presentation, and Steve has been working with them long before today to make sure that things are in place. And this was a little different the way he did it, but he's been creative about how we're going to present, the PowerPoint presentation. But feel free, if anything happens, that you can continue to present to the audience. And just as information, we do live stream as well as Facebook Live, and we do have an audience out there that's not with us here. But we send the invitations out to a number of individuals. We don't know who's going to show up on Tuesday mornings, but it goes out every Sunday night. So people, and a lot of people go back and review the presenters that we have. So with that in mind, once again, silence your phone, and we will facilitate the questions and answers session. We have people that want to ask questions, so people there. And we ask them to ask that question in 30 seconds to a minute, one question at a time. We have to recircle them, and we ask you to take as long as you need to answer the questions. And at the end, we'd like to get announcements, which will be given to Steve, and he will post it on our website. So we ask you to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company. And once, as I mentioned, because we are the facilitators, we try to make sure that things are orderly done. We will recognize them by show of hands. First thing that you see up, that will be the first question. And we just go around and do it that way. And we have a timekeeper. If we go with the time, we've been doing pretty good in the last 2 or 3 sessions because Winston has been our facilitator. He's hard. But Natalie is our timekeeper, and she will let you know when you're over your time in terms of giving the answer, but more than likely for the people that's asking questions. So without any further ado, you want to get started? Tell us something.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. And thank you for the invite, and thank you for all the people that are viewing this online as well. My name is Alyssa. I'm the site manager for Accellacare. We're now off of Randolph Road. We're going to be talking a little bit more about clinical research and what our clinical research organization stands for, and the research that we do, and why the research that we do is so important. A little bit about myself. My background, I have a PhD in nutrition biochemistry. I've been in clinical research for about 8 years now, The reason I got into research is because I really wanted to study the effects of diet and disease in human populations, especially minority populations in regards to health disparities, as well as health equity within our communities. So a little bit about my research, I looked at how fiber in diets and probiotics and prebiotics affected human gut health, as well as access to care in food deserts, so places that don't have quality access to good fibrous foods, so fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, etc. And then my colleagues here, I have Ajana, who's going to tell her a little bit about herself, as well as Roma.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ajana Blackwell. I am a graduate from Bennett College 2017, and I am also a graduate of North Carolina A&T 2020. I have both degrees in biology. I am a certified nursing assistant as well. I started clinical research 2 years ago, and since then I love it. I love the benefits that I've seen with each patient or candidate. And yeah. I'm Pastor Roma.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I like good energy. My name is Roma Durham, and I have been in healthcare since 1983. And, excuse me, and I do work with various organizations throughout the metropolitan area here in Charlotte. And I currently serve on 3 boards. I'm on the West Side Land Trust Board. I'm also on the City Commission Board trying to fight displacement here in the city. And I currently hold the role as Vice President in the Howie Acres community. So believe me, my hands is full between working with Accellacare and in the community. I try to make myself accessible and also positive service to others. What led me into clinical research is my interest to advance medicine in the effectiveness and safety towards patient care. We all know about past transgressions that some groups have experienced, like the Henrietta Lacks and the well-known Tuskegee experiment, as well as Burtis Hardison with the hole in the head through radiation. We all are familiar with that. And I think that makes some minority groups a little hesitant about getting into vaccine trials. But things have changed tremendously over the years. So today, my colleagues, our objectives is to accomplish several things during this presentation: to inform, to educate, to inspire or motivate each of you to have a clear and better understanding of what clinical research is. So let's get started, shall we? Have any of you here in this room been a clinical participant? Okay. Oh, great. Thank you. We appreciate your participation. What is clinical research? Clinical research studies are the backbone of drug development. They provide critical information about an investigational drug safety and effectiveness. They are conducted to help develop diagnostic tools, medical equipment, and to create treatment to prevention options for medical, to prevent options for medical conditions. Who is Accellacare? Well, you see the team. We work as a team in Accellacare because we want to make sure that each of our participants receive the best care, safety, in their trial that they're participating in to be effective for them. Accellacare, formerly PMG Research, is a global site network that conducts clinical research studies for the most reputable sponsors in pharmaceutical development. Our mission is to provide clinical research as a care option and support pharmaceutical companies and biotech with accelerating the development of drugs and devices that save lives and improve quality of life. Accellacare extends across the globe with 20 plus Accellacare sites, 55 affiliate sites in 6 countries with expertise in a wide range of therapeutic areas. It has relationships with more than 150 principal investigators, connecting it to 8.1 million plus patients. And you'll hear more about the principal investigators, as I have mentioned here in this slide. Accellacare locations. Now, we do have a program called Refer a Friend. So sometimes if someone that doesn't live in Charlotte, they may be able to participate in one of our other sites, as you can see here listed. We have the Salisbury site, which is in Rowan County, and Hickory site, which is in Catawba, Piedmont Healthcare site, which is in Argyle County, as well as the Winston-Salem site, which is in Davis County. Dr. George Rad. Dr. George Rad has been in the position here in Charlotte for quite some time. I have been working with him, I would say, for the last 5 or 6 years. I actually used to run his lab before I went into clinical research. He's a very warm and caring person, very attentive. He's had 2 practices here over the years that he has been practicing. One of his facilities used to be over on Berry Hill. So he's quite familiar with the people here in Charlotte. And this is Dr. Sensenbrenner. I've known Dr. Sensenbrenner for quite some time. He's a very warm and open person. He's a very family person, because I know this for a fact. He takes his staff during the Christmas holidays out to work together. He's just that type of physician that he reaches out in the community as well. His practice is over off of Ray Road, but both of these PIs work with any participant that will be part of Accellacare's clinical trial program. Therapeutic areas. We have heart health, sleep disorders, immune diseases, vaccines, diabetes, digestive problems, urology, respiratory diseases, e-cigarettes, women's health, liver disorders, pediatrics, joint conditions, weight management, neurology, migraines, thyroid diseases. Now, as you can see, some of these areas, therapeutic areas, and these conditions, some of them actually affect more African Americans than you can really believe. And we will show you in the next slide, when you look at the numbers as far as participation among African American or minority groups, it's lower than what you would believe. But some of these diseases really do plague us. So it's really important that we do try to get a better understanding of how critical it is for minority groups to help further the improvement of medication. Why diversity in clinical trials matter. The U.S. population has become increasingly diverse, and ensuring meaningful representation of racial and ethnic minorities in clinical trials for regulated medical products is fundamental to public health. And you see that come from the FDA commissioner. People may react to the same medication in different ways based on age, gender, weight, race, ethnicity, and other factors. The goal is to understand the efficacy and safety of medicines and vaccines for people from all different communities. Diversity in clinical trials. As you can see, Black African Americans make up 13.4% of the U.S. population. But look at the number percentage of trial participants. Hispanic Latinos represent 18.1% of the U.S. population, but less than 1% of trial participants. Known challenges may include, and this is what we want to help with, these barriers. Low income as a barrier to participation, investigator bias, medical mistrust, and that goes back to the past transgressions, limited health and research literacy, transportation access. Now, I can say some of the sponsors do offer transportation assistance for some of their clinical trials. Not all, but some do. How is Accellacare increasing diversity in clinical trials? These are the numbers here of people that live within Mecklenburg County. We have 29.50% Black African Americans, 6.44% of Asian, and 0.62% of American Indian Alaska Native, and 9.34% of other. And we want to be able to build in these areas. That's why we're here this morning, to work with community-based organizations and patient advocacy groups, because we want to work to eliminate barriers to participation. Accellacare Icon Network conducts worldwide clinical trials. Common clinical research terms. So this is where we get into the meat of it when you hear the different terms that you decide to be a participant with us. Clinical research or study coordinator. That's what I do, as well as my colleague, Ajana. Clinical research coordinator is an individual that handles the administrative and day-to-day responsibilities of a clinical trial and acts as a liaison for the clinical site. This person may collect the data or review it before it is entered into a database. Our PI. Now, our PI is the two physicians that were on the previous slides. That's what we call them. They're physicians, but they're PIs, which are principal investigators. The person or persons in charge of a clinical trial or a scientific research grant. The principal investigator prepares and carries out the clinical trial protocol, which is the plan for the study, or research paid for by the grant. The principal investigator also analyzes the data and reports the results of the trial or grant research. Protocol, a document that describes the objectives, design, methodology, statistical consideration, and organization of a trial. Efficacy, indication that the clinical trial intervention produces a desired therapeutic effect on the disease or condition under investigation. Screening process, a process designed to determine individuals' eligibility for participation in a clinical research study. Eligibility criteria, list of criteria guiding information of participants into a study. The criteria describes both inclusionary and exclusionary factors. For example, inclusion criterion, participant must be between 55 and 85 years old. Exclusion criterion, smokes greater than 1 pack of cigarettes a day. So we call this IE. If you hear the term IE, that's inclusion and exclusion. That's what we use during the clinical. Randomization. The process of assigning clinical trial participants to treatment or control groups using an element of chance to determine the assignments in order to reduce bias. So it's like a flip of a coin. You may get in one group, you may not. Placebo. A placebo is an inactive pill, liquid, powder, or other intervention that has no treatment value. In clinical trials, experimental treatments are often compared with placebos to assess the treatment's effectiveness. Placebo-controlled study, a method of investigation in which an inactive substance/treatment, which is the placebo, is given to one group of participants while the test article is given to another group. The results obtained in the two groups are then compared to see if the investigational treatment is more effective in treating the condition. Y'all with me so far? Okay, I don't want you to go to sleep. Informed consent, a process by which a participant or legal guardian voluntarily confirms his or her willingness to participate in a particular trial, after having been informed of all aspects of the trial that are relevant to the participant's decision to take part in a clinical trial. Informed consent is usually documented by means of a written, signed, and dated informed consent form. We cannot do anything to you until a consent form is signed. Informed consent form, a document that describes the rights of a study participant and provides details about the study, such as its purpose, duration, required procedures, and key contacts. Risk and potential benefits are explained in the informed consent document. GCP, what we call good clinical practice, a standard for the design, conduct, performance, monitoring, auditing, recording, analysis, and reporting of clinical trials that provides assurance that the data and reported results are credible and accurate, and that the rights, integrity, and confidentiality of trial participants are protected. Okay, this is where we get into the different phases. Phase 0, exploring if and how a new drug may work. These are exploratory studies that often use only a few small doses of a new drug in a few patients. The phase 0 studies have researchers find out whether the drugs do what they are expected to do. Phase 1, is the treatment safe? Phase 1 studies of a new drug are usually the first that involve people. These studies usually include a small number of people, from 20 to 80. This will usually be the first time the medicine has been tried on humans, and therefore there's an unavoidable element of risk. Phase 2, does the treatment work? If a new treatment is found to be reasonably safe in phase 1 clinical trials, it can then be tested in phase 2 clinical trials to look for evidence that it works. The medicine is tested on a larger group of people who are ill. This is to get a better idea of the effects in the short term. Now, since I have been working as a clinical research coordinator, phase 3 has been the studies that myself and Ajana have been working on. Phase 3, is it better than what's already available? Phase 3 clinical trials compare the safety and effectiveness of the new treatment against the current standard treatment. They test in larger groups of people who are ill and compare new medicine against an existing treatment or a placebo to see if it's better in practice and if it has important side effects. Finally, phase 4, post-marketing surveillance. Phase 4 trials take place after all the previous stages have been passed and have been given marketing license. The medicine can now be made available on prescription. The safety, side effects, and effectiveness of the medicine continue to be studied while it is being used in practice. regulation, and ethics. Clinical studies have a regulatory and ethical framework to protect its participants. A clinical study can only be offered to our study patients once it has been approved by the FDA as well as an independent ethics committee. And the independent ethics committee is a makeup of the IRB. And who sits on the IRB can be someone in this room that's non-scientific affiliated. What is the IRB and what is its purpose? Institutional review boards, IRBs, review research studies to ensure that they comply with applicable regulations, meet commonly accepted ethical standards, follow institutional policy, and adequately protect research participants. Who are the members? As I stated earlier, it could be someone, just a citizen as yourself. An IRB consists of at least 5 members of varying backgrounds. Must have at least 1 scientist member and at least 1 member whose primary concerns are non-scientific. Well, now we're going to have all of you potential participants to go on a journey with Miss Ajana.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to go on a participant journey. So say, for instance, I am currently enrolling for a gout study. So with this study, we will have, say, for instance, you give me a call or I call you. We're going to go through the pre-screen. With pre-screening, I got to ask you a couple of questions just to see if you are eligible to come in for a screening visit. If you are eligible, we'll set up an appointment. You'll come in for a screening visit, and during this screening visit, you'll go through the informed consent. As Ms. Roma stated, the informed consent is where you're going to read it, and I'm also going to go over it with you. If you have any questions, that's when we'll go over it together. It's voluntary for the whole study, like you're volunteering yourself. And once you sign it, that's when we can move forward with the whole screening visit. The screening visits may consist of blood draws, ECG, vital signs. You'll see our PI, which is Dr. Rad, and he'll do like a physical or whatever it is asking per protocol to do. Within the screening visit, once we get your lab results back and everything else is good, that's when we'll know if you're qualified for the study, and that's when you go through the enrollment/randomization. Usually during this time is when you would get the study medication or the placebo. With that, you'll get a diary to keep up with what's going on, so that we can keep up with what's going on with you. If you have any effects, or if you're just not feeling good, or you'll give us a call. Also, during the screening visit and during the enrollment randomization time, we do ask that you give us a call to let us know if anything changes, such as your medication, your health, or anything. You give us a call. We have a 24-hour phone line. After that, you go through your study visits. So we do discuss study visits during the screening time. So that is a certain paperwork that we give you, and it shows you every single thing that you will be going through at each visit. We do highly suggest that you come to every single visit, whether it's a phone call, please pick up your phone, and please call us back if you're not able to pick up your phone, because that is very important during these study times. During the study visit, you may come into the office, and you may have the phone call visit as stated. At the end of the participation, you also have to go through a certain process as well to close you out. We do ask you certain questions to see how the study went, how the study drug went for you, and certain questions like that. Thank you.
Benefits of participating. You'll be closely monitored, your health will be closely monitored. Study medication at no cost. Study-related tests and care at no cost. As you said, we may have to do blood work, urinalysis, x-ray. It just depends on what the protocol is set up for. Compensation for time and travel. Support the development of future medications, vaccines, and medical devices. These are some common questions. How is my personal information collected and handled? When you come into our office and we're doing a screening, we do collect data. We go over your medical history, your medications, and we can assure you it's not sold to a third party, okay? And we do have a secure room that's locked. You have to have a code to get in, or badge. So it is secure. Are there any risks to participating in clinical research? All of that is in the informed consent that you have to sign. It breaks it down, the risk and possible discomforts. So you're not signing anything blind, not at all, because it's all written there in the informed consent. What is the time commitment? Well, each clinical trial is different. We have some where you may just come in, for example, it was just one day, and this was someone that had an anticoagulation problem, and that was just one day, less than an hour. So each one varies. It could be 3 months, it could be 2 years. It just depends on what the protocol is and how the contract is set up with the sponsor. What is the compensation? That varies too. It's what's set up with the sponsor and how the contract is. So it could be $5, it could be $200. Do I have access to the PI? Yes, you most certainly do. Dr. Rad and Dr. Simpson-Brenner. You come in, you need to talk to them, of course. If there's something that myself or Ajana cannot answer, that's what they're there for. How many people are currently enrolled in our studies? Oh, the numbers vary. It depends on the sponsor. They may be looking for 200 people. They may just need 10 people. It just depends on what the sponsors are looking for at that particular time with that study. Will I always get placebo? We don't know. You may or may not. Some people can tell the difference if they receive the placebo or the IP, which is IP is investigational drug product. This is our facility where we are now. We're right there on Wendover Road, right down the street from Billingsley. We have 8 exam rooms, our lab. We have monitoring space, coordinated space for us. As I said, we have a secure file room, secure drug storage room, secure unblinded room, secured equipment and device room, and our supply storage room, all are secure. And this is Dr. Simpson-Brenner's office. As I say, he's right off Ray Road over on Blakeney. And he has monitored space, his coordinated space, drug room, his lab. So we're towards the end now of my presentation. We want to thank each and every one of you for listening and allowing us so much to come out and present this valuable information. And I truly, truly hope that what we have shared with each of you today and the audience that's on live stream will inspire you and to motivate you to be a possible participant to help further medicine. And right now, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Burns. I do want to say this publicly because I believe in giving a person their flowers while they're here. Dr. Burns, I want to thank you so much for being the motivator that you are for leading our office at Accellacare forward.
Thank you, Roma.
So,
Thank you. And with that, we'll take any questions.
okay, our first question is from Alyssa.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. So my question is based on, given you mentioned Tuskegee experiment, and if I'm not mistaken, Accellacare is kind of a liaison between the pharmaceutical world and the community to do these trials, right? To make sure these things work. And one of the things about the Tuskegee experiment that was fascinating to me is everybody around it thought they were doing a service. They felt they were doing the right thing. They were unaware about what was really happening. And I wanted to know what was Accellacare's role in kind of vetting which trials or which drugs you'll perform, and the sensitivities, and how do you address the sensitivities to specifically Black people?
Of course, yes. So Accellacare is a part of a larger network called ICON. And underneath ICON is a huge branch of different business development teams. And these teams build partnerships and relationships with different pharmaceutical companies. So these pharmaceutical companies are not only vetted within the business development team by teams of leading experts. We have teams like my director above me are physicians. So they have a lot of relationships with these pharmaceutical companies, but they also have patient experience. So their first role and their first goal is patient safety. After that is patient efficacy and value of the product. So does this product improve, or does it have the potential to improve quality of life in individuals? In regards to Black and brown and minority people, that is a huge concern, of course, within clinical research. We understand the transgressions that have happened in the past, and we do have diversity and inclusion teams within ICON and Accellacare. So all the protocols that are written, they are written in a way and vetted through the IRB process to make sure that they have all the ethics and the values that will pertain to each individual. So we have to make sure that it's safe. We have to make sure that it's feasible to the community. We have to make sure that it's a quality study. And of course, our PI also has the discretion, I should say, to pick and choose certain studies. So there are certain studies that he may not feel is good for his population, and that's a conversation that he has with Accellacare and ICON as well. But our number one goal is patient safety and patient feasibility and patient efficacy. We want to make sure that the participants that we have feel safe. We want to make sure that the trial that they're participating in is safe, and there's a lot of channels, there's a lot of tape that we have to go through to ensure patient safety. Another thing is with Black and brown and minority communities, we also want to include transparency in our research. That's extremely important. So the research that we do, we work with companies that publish their data. We work with companies that have open forums for their participants. We work with companies that, are actually encouraging diversity within their clinical trials. That's really important to Accellacare.
Thank you, Crispin.
Good morning. Do you work with alternative medicine? And exactly, this is something I never get a transparent or a clear answer on. What does drugs supposed to do? Is it supposed to cure, or is it supposed to just make symptoms manageable? And do they have any drugs, like it's always another repercussion from taking drugs, like your kidney or liver?
Yeah, so for your first question, in terms of alternative medicines, there are some protocols out there. There's also different companies that aren't in pharma or biotech companies that are looking at alternative medicines. So yes, we do alternative medicine research. It just depends on when that protocol comes through Accellacare or ICON's desk and kind of how it's vetted through that process with business development as well as our director of research. In regards to how drugs work, that is a very complicated question. It's probably why you've never gotten a straightforward answer. Different drugs work in different ways, and we do know that some drugs have efficacy to impact certain disorders or diseases. Drugs don't always cure an ailment. We do know that. The goal of a lot of the research that we do is to see how it affects quality of life. So the drug that you may receive, it may or may not have a particular benefit. Now, in regards to it affecting other bodily organs, that is a possibility, but all of that it will be listed in the informed consent form, because the studies that we do have already gone through certain phases that have affect safety and risk. So for example, if you are participating in a study that's looking at lung function, right? It may say certain risks may include shortness of breath, frequent urination. It will list out everything that you would possibly experience. Anything that you do experience while you're participating in the trial that's not in the consent form, it's very important that you reach out to our study coordinators or your PI, because we document all of these things and we send it to the study sponsor. They know all the things that are going on with our participants. Like I said, patient safety is extremely, extremely important. But to go back to your drug question, like I said, it's very loaded and I don't have that particular answer for you. But in regards to actually curing a disorder, that would be something that we would have to work with your physician on. I do know there's drugs that can mitigate symptoms, and there's some drugs that will cure things. You know, like we have like antibiotics out there that will get rid of certain bacterial disorders. And, you know, there's viruses out there that have drugs that can cure it. But it's very loaded and it depends on the indication that you're speaking about.
Okay, Basista.
Yeah, I have a question, but they're interrelated. The first one is, it's not that I want to ask so many questions, but I just want to know something before I ask the question. Who owns the study? Is that the drug company or your entity?
So ultimately the sponsor. The sponsor is the person that creates the protocol. So within a sponsor team, so let's just say company X, they have a team of research scientists, physicians, statisticians that build and create a protocol, medical monitoring teams, based off the current research for their product. So they're the ones that own it. Then what they do is they contract out this study to contract research organizations like Accellacare. So Accellacare is located all across the United States. We mentioned some of the ones that are right around the corner from us, or not around the corner, excuse me, in our particular area. And so they contract different areas because they want to get real world data across the span of the United States or across the span of the world. Oh, there we go.
And so are they for-profit or non-profit, your sponsors?
Oh, they're pharmaceutical companies, so they're for profit. Yeah.
I want to see why. So, I mean, then how can we compensate for what happened in the 50s on the Tuskegee study that we want to preach today? Because that's profit. Profit's the killer. Profit's the key. So are you going to change it from for-profit to non-profit so people can benefit or for their bottom line? So you have to tell us the truth. Which one is it, for public benefit or for corporate bottom line?
Yeah, so I can only speak from the CRO and the research scientist side. I can't speak for pharma. I've never worked for a pharma company before, but we do know that pharma companies are for profit. But the goal of the research that we do is to progress modern day medicine. Now, in regards to the things that have happened in the past at universities or with other pharma companies or even, with other minority groups, there's systems and channels in place to protect patient safety and patient data. So our goal at CROs, not just Accellacare, but if you participate in a trial anywhere, even at the local hospital, there's things in place to protect you as a participant. That's why you have an informed consent form. That's why you're the PI who's ultimately responsible for your well-being and your health while you're participating in that trial. In regards to working with nonprofit organizations, yes, there are clinical studies with nonprofit organizations. Universities do them all the time. If you go to a website called clinicaltrials.gov, you will be able to see all of the affiliations of the research. So research nowadays is extremely transparent. People are able to actually see who is sponsoring the research. And legally, we have to tell you in your consent form who is paying for this study.
Ken.
Mr. Coons.
A certain there is no profit or continued business in a cure. And you said that one of your objectives is to be able to make people, I think you said, I'll paraphrase, comfortable in their care of what they got. So is priority, and I know we got antibiotics, yeah, that's easy, that's the low-hanging fruit. You can cure that and not really affect a whole lot of profit because you're gonna get it again probably. But such things as certain cancers, in a preference, Big Pharma is a for-profit business. Honestly, I'd like to have an answer in terms of where do you foresee the greatest need and desire in terms of finding either a cure or to make you comfortable and have easy living or easier living with your disease?
So I'll speak for myself, right? Just from my research science background and the work that I've done in the past. So this is not an affiliation with Accellacare at all. But for myself, in regards to clinical research and actually finding a cure, that is the ultimate goal. Diseases and disorders are changing at the molecular level daily, constantly, rapidly. There are a lot of genetic disorders that are extremely rare. There are a lot of rare cancers out there that we don't have enough people to actually study the efficacy in with a certain drug. So there's a lot of scientists out there that are working really, really hard in academia and industry and in pharma to find cures for certain diseases and disorders. In regards to making people comfortable, maybe I should switch up my terms. The goal is to improve quality of life. So unfortunately, sometimes in some diseases and disorders, we do not have a cure. We don't have a pathway, we don't have a mechanism, we don't even have a drug of action. And so what we're doing as researchers is we're working towards finding a cure. And that's what clinical trials is all about. It's a trial and error. There's people in labs that are working and failing every single day to find cures for certain disorders. We know these disorders have been around for decades, years, generations. And they're genetic within our community, and they're ever growing within our community. And we sometimes as researchers, we just can't keep up. So our goal in clinical research is to improve quality of life. It is to find cures and diseases, but it takes time. We've been doing cancer research for generations. It takes time, and there still hasn't been a cure because the way that these diseases grow and multiply is way beyond me. And so it's kind of hard to just explain that at that level, but I don't want to make someone comfortable. My goal is to improve somebody's quality of life. And sometimes people participate in research because they know that they're able to share their experiences with the medical community with the hope of improving medicine in the future. So the more data that we have, the more data that we can study in individuals of different populations, different minorities, different ailments, different backgrounds, different beliefs, the more data that we're actually able to use to progress modern medicine forward.
Okay, Jackie?
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself personally? And also, I think you showed the facility that one PI is in, but you didn't show the other, right?
But we show both.
You show both?
Mhm.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I have a PhD in nutrition biochemistry from the University of Florida. And so my background is actually in gut physiology and immunology. So I studied the gut, so GI disorders. I got into clinical research because I really wanted to study the effects of diet and disease on minority populations and health disparities. So I don't have a public health background, but that's kind of what got me into working in a lab at the University of Florida. Going from there, I've been in protocol development. I've worked in genetic rare disorders, so I've worked in muscular dystrophy, I've worked in Angelman syndrome, I've worked with sickle cell. I've worked in nutrition deficiencies, and now that kind of all led me into the things that I really enjoy, which is ultimately clinical trial management. And with clinical trial management, what my role is to essentially facilitate a site, to make sure my site is following all the proper rules and procedures and abiding by the clinical research protocol.
I guess I meant way back.
Oh, way back.
Where did you grow up?
Where your mama live? Where your mama live from?
Oh, okay, gotcha, okay. Okay, well, my parents are from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My parents are from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I actually grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I am a Floridian. My husband, actually, the reason why I'm here in Charlotte is because my husband is from Charlotte. His parents and family are from Charlotte and Wilmington. So he actually opened up his own law firm here. He's was active duty Navy. Now he's in the reserves. So he has a law firm here in town. So that's how I'm in Charlotte. But yeah, parents are from Philadelphia. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Okay, we have a question from someone that's texted us from Alyssa M.
Yeah.
And the question is to ask you that are here as our guests, if any of you have ever been in a study, and if so, what study have you been in? So how do you want, with the three of you answering that?
Yeah, so I'll start for myself. Yes, I've been in a lot of studies. When I was in graduate school, I participated in any study that was available. I'm gonna be honest, it was easy. I participated in a lot of studies that were for healthy participants. So either diet-related studies, I participated in studies that they just wanted to look at blood lipid levels between a certain age population. I've participated in studies that have to do with food. I've participated in taste studies. I've participated in so many different studies. I haven't done any medically invasive studies before, but I've had friends that have done medically invasive studies, and I've had friends that have diseases and disorders that have participated in studies, as well as family members.
I had my son. I have a 3-year-old son, and when he was about 1, I put him in a study called iGrow in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that was just to see the growth and development for him to the age of 2. And with that, we usually just see how he interacts with me, see how he interacts with me just being in the room, seeing how he interacts with me being out of the room. And that was a pretty good study for me. Listen, I was in college, I was getting my master's, so that worked for me. Also, in my undergrad year, I did a study with my basketball team, which they pretty much were seeing our heart rate and different vital signs as we was running on a treadmill. That helped too while I was in undergrad, but yeah.
Yes, I have participated in 2 studies. One was a blood study to see if it was a sickle cell study, because I do have a sickle cell in our family. So I participated in that study. It's been some years back. And I also participated in the flu study. But this is just my own opinion. This is something that I always tell people. This is not Accellacare. When you look at your medication, for anybody that takes medication, when you read it, it does say, these are the known side effects. And I'm saying that to say, I know we all are apprehensive about medicine and what has happened in the past. Look at COVID. And I think clinical research did put more people into paying attention to research. All that I'm saying, based upon the data that we receive from participants, that's how the scientists are able to find out about the different effects that people get when they are doing trials. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, Natalie.
I'm having a hard time connecting, Dr. Burns, what you said in the beginning about you wanting to do the research to help Black for a better life and the food deserts and that type of thing with what Accellacare actually does. Because my understanding is you're monitoring people as they take the trial medications. But I don't see how that relates to helping me in the food desert that I live in.
Yeah. Apologies to that. That was more my research background when I was a doctoral student. So Accellacare does not do food-related research in regards to research that it's desert. That was my intro before we started the presentation.
Okay, Tom.
Yeah, Tommy Roberts. The Tuskegee study is not one of the only studies. They studied us for everything. In fact, that's why we're here. That's why they brought us here, because we were studied and injected and injected. And that's why black people have a mistrust of the government, of medicine, of society, because they used us, you know. And I don't blame, but my question is, how did you get into this? How did you get into this? And don't let them fool.
Yeah. So I always loved science. So that's why I decided to pursue my degree in biochemistry. I actually wanted to go to medical school, but I took a nutrition class and I saw the health disparities within my own community. I was going to school in Kaysville, Florida, but I also saw how nutrition affects a lot of diseases and disorders that we have when it comes to type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, even gut and brain health. And so that's why I got into it. I was wouldn't say I'm a foodie, but I like food. And so when I took this intro to nutrition class, it really opened up my eyes to that. And that kind of just led me down a path into clinical research. So I started working in a lab that did a lot of molecular genetics, which then led me into a clinical research path. So my particular research interest is diet and disease. It's not Accellacare. That's my particular research interest, and that's how I got into clinical research.
Forgive my ignorance of the terminology. I don't know this world, but I would like to know, what is Accellacare's, I guess, batting average for trials that essentially make it to market? And also with studies that don't go as well, what is the follow-up? How are they insured? Is there management if the drug doesn't agree with them? What is the care regimen for the back end?
Yeah, so the batting average, I actually just started Accellacare in January. Full disclaimer, I just started in January. But other companies that I've worked for, I always get really excited when I turn on the TV and I see a commercial for a product that I've worked on. So it takes years. Drug development takes years. It doesn't happen overnight. And so sometimes drugs don't meet efficacy and the trial does end early. Or sometimes we don't meet the population that we need or the goals for enrollment because the inclusion-exclusion criteria was too rigid, or a lot of people didn't pass screening. And that's when you kind of, sites go back, or sites like Accellacare goes back to the sponsor and explains some of the challenges that our participants are having with recruitment and retention. It could be the study protocol design. It could be the actual medication itself. People are dropping because they're having, effects that aren't warranted, or they've already talked to their physician or the PI and they don't want to participate. Remember, all of this is voluntary, so of course you have that right. But all the feedback that we receive from our participants goes back to our sponsor. And sometimes, unfortunately, drugs don't meet efficacy. Like, they'll do an interim analysis. A drug could be a year, or a study could be a year long. And they say, you know what, at 3 months, we're going to see if there's any efficacy. We'll see if there's any change within these certain outcomes or parameters that we're looking at. And if it doesn't, because clinical trials are so expensive, sometimes they do end a trial early if it's not going in the direction that they see or they hypothesize it to go, and they kind of will rework it and start over. But if that's the case, patient safety, as I mentioned, is extremely important. It's the #1 thing. If a drug or IP or placebo is stopped, there's systems and protocols in place that the PI will do in educating the patient on how to come off of that placebo or come off of that drug medication for the trial.
Okay. Kristen?
Forgive me, I have a hard time summing up sometimes because it's so late. But I think also too, it's not so much the past. This is a continuous thing, and to this day, Black women are dying at proportionally high rates just from something as natural as having a child. So it's continuous, discontinuous, and I think always looking at it in the past, kind of put a Band-Aid on it because it still happens.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And as Black women, we're extremely aware of, you know, the issues within our healthcare system when it comes to Black women in childbirth, when it comes to Black women and women's health in general, Black women in oncology, Black women being heard or seen, our needs being taken care of. I think we have all experienced that, or I can at least speak for myself, have experienced that with primary or specialist physicians. Our goal, or my goal, when it comes to encouraging, I will speak for Black women, my peers, my parent, my mother, my cousins, and participating in research, is because it is the one way that we can educate future physicians, dentists, physical therapists on how Black women's bodies work and operate. There's not a lot of data on how Black women's bodies work and operate. For example, what you're talking about with women's health, there are some medical books, and this is not Accellacare related, but there are some medical books that say Black and brown people can tolerate pain higher than their white counterparts, which is completely ludicrous and completely false. I bleed just like everybody else bleeds. You know, I have the same pain tolerance. I mean, we all have different pain tolerance levels. So the reason that stuff is in books is not only because of, you know, the ignorance of that, and I know we can't put a Band-Aid on the past, of course, but what we can do going forward is be a representation in these medical journals. We can have a voice in our data within the science and how we progress modern medicine. We make up a huge population. The drugs that they're prescribing to us, or the treatments that they're prescribing to us, if we're not represented in that data population, how do we know how it affects us as a people in a community?
Oh, that wasn't my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Oh.
I didn't get my question. But, okay, with that being said, disease comes from a number of factors. And I know that pharmaceutical is like one of the biggest businesses here. It's money, it's capital. So with that being said, like, why is medicine being pushed as the answer instead of like the things that's causing the cancers from the like the synthetic vitamins they give you as a pregnant woman? Like, you're starting off with a baby with baby lotions and baby powders, and all of those are so chemical formula. Like, you're starting, the air is dirty, fluoride in the water. So what about the things that's causing the cancers, instead of just putting Band-Aids on what is the actual problem?
Yeah.
Like highways in Black neighborhoods. It's so many things they're not working on in the food desert. They're just saying, hey, let's just give them this medicine.
Yeah. So, full transparency, everything that you're saying, there are people out there that are researching this. There's universities, there's private equity groups, there's nonprofits. Just because we're talking about pharma right now does not mean that those root problems and those root concerns are not being handled and addressed. A lot of my colleagues actually that are in public health write grants and receive grants in order to understand root causes of certain ailments within our drinking water, for example. They look at air pollution. They look at quality of life within, foster care. So there's a lot of different things that other people have looked at and researched. What we're focusing right now on was Accellacare and pharma, I would say, some of our sponsors. But I 100% agree. The research that Accellacare does, they may one day branch out into looking at different ailments and how things are caused and everything like that. But the disorders that I put into place, like they'll look at diabetes, we may not necessarily do at the level of where the diabetes started. But we do obesity trials in which we understand, how people have become obese, whether through genetics or nutrition and diet, lack of exercise, etc. So I don't want you to think that there's not research being done. There's thousands of people that are actually working on the root causes of diseases and disorders that are not genetically related.
Okay, Mary.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure if this is a question or not, but I think it's very important that we do have a voice in this because a lot of those diseases do affect Black people. And if they're not going to know how we're affected if we don't participate. And the next thing is that if anybody in this room, you don't have to identify yourself because if you're taking any type of medication like blood pressure, hypertension, any kind of medication you're taking, ask yourself, is my quality of life better because I take this medicine? And if I don't take it, what will happen to me? So that will show you the benefit of a clinical trial because every medication that you're taking has gone through a clinical trial. Everything. So I'm just saying, don't kill the message.
Okay.
Okay.
Ken, you're next, and then Basista, and then after him.
A lot of the causes of these illnesses and diseases are making bank off of they're causing these issues. They say all politics is local. Yeah, there's some truth to that, but a lot of politics comes with these big pharma companies who are in part responsible for some of these situations that we find ourselves. Accellacare, you're basically a recruiting tool to get more Black folk into clinical research, if I understood this whole rationale.
No.
No.
No. Accellacare, we're not a recruitment tool to get Black people in. What we're here today is to promote diversity in clinical trials. But Accellacare is a global network. They do trials across the whole entire world, not just in Black and brown people.
That sounds good, but you are presenting the Accellacare story in hopes that some people of color will hear it, accept it, and want to participate in some study in some way. In short, those of us in marketing and background and PR would say, well, it is what it is. But my question has to do more with the big pharma. Suppose you come up with simultaneously something that improves the quality of life, as you have said, and a cure. And now you have your sponsor of that study that you present, Big Pharma, and say, hey, we found something that's going to accomplish two goals, a cure and improvement of the quality of life. Where do you think the majority of the resources will go in terms of getting people to buy into Big Pharma to buy into marketing one or both of those particular ones?
That's the question I actually am unsure of. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten to that point in my career to understand what happens post-marketing or how marketing works in regards to the results that happen in the trial. My goal, and the reason why I got into research is for patient feasibility and research integrity. So I would hope that pharma companies have the integrity to market the product in the right way. So whether it's a cure or a quality of life. And yeah, so I think that's the largest thing is research integrity in itself.
Okay.
During this presentation, a few times I heard you speaking of having a voice on the study. But when you don't own a study, let me give you a scenario. One day you wake up in the morning, you read in the newspaper, you watch the news, the owner of the trial is abusing the information, the test that you conduct. Do you have any recourse? What kind of recourse?
Yeah, so one thing that I really want the goal of this presentation to be also is to educate and inform. The biggest thing is I want every single person to hear, whether they decided to participate in a clinical trial or not, is to be able to educate themselves and ask the proper questions to the physician or the PI or as well as the sponsor. Research today is fully transparent. If you cannot find the answer within the trial or on clinical, that's why we have clinicaltrials.gov. It is a tool that is supposed to educate the general public on all aspects. Who pays for it? Who's participating? Where is it going? What happens afterward? And legally, by law, they have to publish the results. So everyone will ultimately know the results. Another thing I would encourage people to do is look at evidence-based research. The biggest thing is evidence-based. Was it peer-reviewed when you read it in a journal? You can look up the medications that you take and look it up in a peer-reviewed medical journal. Peer review means that it's been reviewed by by different colleagues within the scientific community of various backgrounds. So before that data could even get published, people like myself, I've peer reviewed in journals, will read it and ask very thought-provoking questions to the data. The way someone puts data and how people interpret data is different. So I will look and see data, I might interpret a different way than how someone else written that data up. But the biggest thing is when it comes to education, is to look at it for yourself. Interpret the data for yourself. Read the graphs for yourself. Ask the proper questions. Don't just read the headline. Don't just read the caption. Really read the evidence behind the research. So that's what I would ultimately say is you have to look at evidence-based research. Everything that we see out there is not evidence-based. Everything that we read is not evidence-based. Even some of the products that you take over the counter is not evidence-based. You mentioned vitamins and supplements. I come from a background in nutrition. Some of that work is not evidence-based. It's a category that is not as regulated as drugs. So if you have something you can put in there, supports digestive health, you can put supports health, heart health, supports eye health. Support is just one of those words that you can use to say anything. It doesn't have any tangible substance. So that's why before you take a product over the counter, before you do anything, you can research the actual company and you can research the evidence behind it. So personally for me is I value and work for companies that have strong research integrity and high ethical values.
Okay, we have several questions.
Okay, thank you. Once you enter a client, patient into a trial, and you're going along, how often does a site monitor come in or the FDA to review your charts to make sure you have not missed anything in terms of removing that patient? And who has the ultimate say as to whether it's a go or not at the end?
Okay, so for your first question, we have CRAs, which are clinical research associates that monitor our data. They are essentially like our auditors. We have internal ones and external ones that aren't a part of the sponsor. So we have people come into our office daily, monthly, to check our charts. The reason they check our charts is to ensure patient safety. Are we following the rules of the clinical trial? Are we following the protocol of the clinical trial? Are we asking the right questions? Are we completing things? Did the participant sign all the necessary forms and date it? Did the participant receive a copy of all the forms? If lab values are out of range, how did we do those? Did we report those to the IRB? Did we report those to the sponsor? There's a lot of rules in place. And sometimes we get dinged. Like if we forget stuff, like not just us as sites, we'll get dinged and it gets brought to our attention. And what happens is we have re-education. They bring third parties in to re-educate us on those things. But at our site, we're highly, highly attentive to detail. So we make sure that if we miss something, we're calling that patient right away or that participant right away. We're making sure that the PI is on board with everything. Now, who has the final say or the green light when it comes to drug development or the say-so? Like I said, drug development takes years. So what happens is after they've collected all the data and looked at it and gotten to that point where they see that it has some type of efficacy, then that's when they actually have to present all that data to the FDA. FDA will have the final say if it's ethical or not, or shows efficacy or not, excuse me.
Okay, Rashid.
Hey, could you describe like some of the different pharmaceutical companies you guys work with, and could you just like give us some details on like Accellacare, their relationship with their research and development team and stuff like that?
Yeah. So some of the pharma companies that we work with GSK, we work with Pfizer, we've worked with Johnson & Johnson, we've worked with Adventus Bio, AbbVie, AstraZeneca. We work with some of the smaller biotech companies we also work with, which are kind of like bought up by the larger conglomerates. And then your other question was Accellacare's role in research and development? Or
like your relationship with their research and development team?
Yeah, so Accellacare and Icon have a huge R&D team that works with different sponsors. But also internally, we have our own R&D team. So we have Icon and Accellacare related studies or Icon sponsored trials, which means our physicians are working solely to facilitate these trials. So there's a specific R&D team within Icon that kind of partners with pharma in order to run and produce these studies.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to you, and like, we have a tendency as black people to think that other institutions are superior to the institutions that we have. You know, like where we can do research and stuff. Just like what I'm saying is Mahara is a hospital, research hospital, but we prefer to go to Yale or Harvard. You know, if our school, the schools that we had, if they wasn't as good as Harvard and Yale and Princeton, why don't we make them as good?
Oh,
you know, like we get caught up. Like, if you want to be a doctor, you go to Yale. If you want to be a scientist, you go to Harvard. You know, why can't you go to Mahara? Or why can't you go? You know, if these institutions are not as good as Harvard and Yale and all these white institutions, won't we make them as good?
I 100% agree. However, we have an HBCU grad right here. My brother is an HBCU grad. I have family that members that are HBCU grads. And from my conversations from them, because I've gone to a PWI, is I would have to humbly disagree with you because HBCUs and these medical schools produce some of the finest physicians out there, finest dentists, finest vets out there. And they have some of the most world-renowned academic professors.
Misunderstand. You take what I said out of context. What I said was, why do we think Harvard, Yale, Princeton is better than Mahara? If Mahara is not as good, if it's not as good as these institutions, why don't we make them as good?
can you answer that?
Send them some money,
Okay, can you answer that?
Yeah. I don't know why we can make them better because I already think that they're great institutions. Why else would they not? The thing is that you're talking about is social perception. That's something totally different. But the producers that those colleges and those universities and those medical schools produce, that's up to us as a community to support those physicians that come out of it. You know, and when we see that they graduated from that said institution, is to support them. And just because they didn't graduate from a prestigious Ivy League school does not make it any different. We do know people that have graduated from Ivy League schools that we do not want as our physicians. Okay, let's just be real, and we would have better trust, better relationship, better, you know, community advocacy, whatever, from somebody that has graduated from an HBCU. So I'm not sure if I can answer that question, but yeah.
Okay. Gary.
You kind of, in a roundabout way, partially answered my question. Mr. Kuntz's question in terms of I was going to ask, with pharma being global, and being an international thing, not just U.S. domestic, are you connected to a global network which enhances your ability to see what clinical studies, how they're done nationwide? But you said this is a global institution, so I guess now my question is, does your processes take from international processes? Do they differ in how they do things domestically versus how Accellacare does studies internationally? And then when you're looking at the data, are you drawing in data internationally because race stays consistent globally, although ethnicity differs?
Right. So for the first part of your question about global trials, each country, or I should say each region, has their own system of ethics. So Accellacare and Icon will follow the ethics and guidelines for that particular region. So we follow the United States or the North America guidelines, whereas our European partners or EMEA partners follow the European guidelines. So some things don't mix or cross. Well, we just know that just because the U.S. does stuff differently or accept different things. And now in regards to how the data plays, that is a really big stat question. Yes, I agree. Ethnicity is the one that varies and versus race. But how it's looked at is that some products are marketed differently in Europe or America, or some things have been studied differently in America and Europe. And so the goal is to kind of bring all of that together and have a global amount of data to be able to effectively disseminate that research to that particular population or region. So there's products here in the States that we're trying to do research with in Europe, right? And vice versa, there's products in Europe that are trying to do stuff here in America. So the goal is to just be able to have a large database of data, and then follow the guidelines for each region. Did I answer your question, or kind of? I'm going to talk to you offline so I can get a little bit more.
Okay, we have Winston and Crispin and Ken and Rashid, and that's all we have time for, a 30-second question and a 1 minute or less answer. So, starting with Winston.
Got my question.
Okay, is there any research-based groups where, that's Black or African American, where the studies stay within? Because sometimes I feel that we just share too much, and some things we need to be more controlling over and take control in certain aspects of our own health, our own studies, and how things affect our body.
Yeah, I can't speak at the larger institution level, but I know at the academic level that happens a lot. That's in certain academic institutions, they will just specifically study certain populations, and that is their niche. That's where they study, and then they promote that in specific journals related to that population. So there are journals out there or literature out there that's just specifically for minorities in regards to public health. I personally don't know of any institutions. I know of like academic partners, but I don't know of any like CRO types that only focus on minorities and minority research. Don't quote me. Just because I don't know doesn't mean it's not there, but I don't know of any.
Okay.
Can I come back? I remember quickly. Yeah. So my question is, how do if you have data on this, how are you perceived if you are a clinical patient? So you said when you were in grad school, you would do them all the time, right? And again, this is America. So how would the insurance, how would that affect your level of, or your capability of being insured? Do they look at that as a red flag, or?
No. So your insurance isn't related to this. Like, so any type of study-related procedure outlined within the protocol or in the ICF is strictly paid for by the study.
Is it in your health profile? Like
no. So what you can do is if you want to add it to your health profile, you can't, not the insurance level. So if you want to go to your primary care physician or any specialist and inform that you're participating in this trial, they can add that to your medical record if they need to, but it doesn't affect your insurance.
You don't have to tell them that you're taking like a
You should. So we always recommend in our informed consent form that you talk the study over with your family, your friends, your primary care physician or specialist or whoever you trust medically, so that they are aware that you're participating in this trial.
Okay, Ken.
Since full disclosure, 1990, I participated in an NIH study. I had a severed lingual nerve, and I participated in a 2-year study at Chapel Hill, Dr. John Zaniga, in regards to nerve regeneration. I now have that nerve regeneration that allows. And I also have a friend who has been in 26 years, and plus 20 years, and he's the last.
Ken, you gotta ask your question now.
Of 26 people in that study to survive. My question is, in regards to minority participation, there is a number of African Americans in your collective studies enrollments, and the percent of African Americans in each one of those disciplines. You gave us a lot of percentages. So I want to know, what is the number of African Americans in your collective studies that you have?
With our
Within
clinical,
Accellacare?
within
Yeah.
Accellacare,
Well, yeah.
they haven't given that. We do have, I work directly as a CRC with subjects that come in. So we have received more, I would say, in the past year that I've been there, of minorities participating in the groups of the various studies that I have been doing. It has been a challenge, and it's basically because of the apprehension from the past and what we still are dealing with now. But that's why we try to encourage people, do your own research, is like Dr. Burns was saying. Now, I would love to myself know the data from Accellacare, and that's something that I would have, Dr. Burns and myself would have to speak to the higher ups so we can look at the numbers to see what we can do to improve. But I can say I do deal directly, and have been, with the studies that I'm on. Currently, I am a primary, and when I say primary person, I'm the primary on 2 studies. That means I oversee that study, but I do have co-workers that work along with me as a team. I'm the primary on the endometriosis study, which we do know endometriosis does affect mostly African American women. So I am on that particular study, as well as I'm a primary on the RSV study, and I think people are more familiar with the respiratory infection now with that study. I'm finished, yes, but I hope that did answer your question.
Okay. We have one last question from Rashid, and then we're going to end it this morning.
Oh, okay. So if I was prescribed medication and I took it like frequently, and would that be putting my trust into the clinical trial system and benefiting from somebody completed a clinical trial to?
So if you're currently on a medication and you decide to participate in a clinical trial, what happens is we get your full medical history. We understand exactly what medication that you're on. That particular medication that you're on may be a part of the exclusionary criteria. So you may have to stop taking that medication under the guidance of our PI or your primary care physician, of course, right? We want to make sure patient safety is the first thing. So when any medication that anyone takes, any type of therapies anybody takes, all of that is added into the data. So they're called covariates. They're added into the data to actually show what the effect of the true one is compared to what you take on a daily basis.
Laura, if I could ask a question not related to Accellacare, because I didn't get notes. It's a quick question that can help everybody that's over 65, and I know there are several of us in the room who meet that criteria.
Okay.
I got a text from CVS telling me that there is a new COVID booster shot that anyone over 65 should be taking. CVS is the only one that has told me that. I haven't heard it from anyone else. Are you aware of that at all?
I actually am not aware of that, but my grandmother and my mom actually, I don't think they got the text, but they also went into like CVS or Walgreens, one of them, and they said that. But I do know, because for my grandmother, that her physician has always recommended to her that she get those boosters whenever they come out. But that's her physician and her relationship with them. But I haven't heard about that.
Okay, thank you.
We want to thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Good job.
And please, like, send me an email, or a text message, or give me a call, or anything like that. I really appreciate you guys coming. You guys asked some very, very thought-provoking questions, and I really appreciate that.
Stood in the fire.